All right, we probably can get started, and as people filter in, we'll do our best to kind of circle back. But thank you very much for joining us today and taking the time this afternoon. Um, my name's Michael Manishin. I'm going to be kind of kicking us off through the conversation today, and with me I have Divya Ravichandran. Can you go to the next slide, Divya? As well as Natalie Collins and Heather Salavera. So Heather and Natalie are from National Research Council, and part of today's session is going through their experience with the tool that we're going to be talking about today, excuse me, which is Grant Plus, one of our solutions that we offer here at Eperformance, and we'll get into that as well. But before we dive right in, I want to mention that throughout the process, if you do have a question, please feel free to drop it in the chat. We'll do our best to kind of either respond in line through chat, or we'll collect all of them and go through the more complicated answers towards the end, or if something's still unclear. So yeah, a little bit about us. We're Eperformance, so we have 20 plus years of experience in the medium to large enterprise grants management solutions, and we've based all of our experience on the Microsoft technology stack. So over the years, it's changed quite significantly, but we've always focused on using Microsoft technologies. We promote better practices in grants management. So, we're always doing our best to identify what the best practices are within grants and evolving as we go. We're recommended by Microsoft for anything that's grant specific, and for our solution that we're going to be talking about today, and Divya is going to be giving us a little bit more details on. And most of our staff are certified Microsoft professionals. And on the business side, we're grant automation specialists. So our day-to-day is always with grants specifically, and we have a large, robust knowledge in the field. A little bit more on our services. So we don't do just grants, even though it is one of our major focuses. We have a number of solutions, as you can see on the right-hand side there. So funding program management, obviously a large part of grants and a large part of Grant Plus. Security screening is another very large vertical for us. So we have a solution called Security Plus that focuses on departmental security clearances. If you'd like to know more about any of these solutions, please feel free to reach out, and we'll talk about that a bit later. Intake portals of any kind. So if there's information that needs to be requested and submitted, that's something that we can help with, as well as field services. So there's a field services offering by Microsoft, and we can use this platform as a great foundation and critique it to the needs to your specific needs. In terms of our services, not just our solutions, we're a secure cloud technology. We do host any of the solutions that I mentioned on the right-hand side there. We deliver multiple solutions, so not just the right-hand side. We're capable of delivering much more and are very flexible. We do Microsoft Dynamics consulting because we have a vast knowledge of the tool and like to help out in any way that we can, as well as business transformation, which is learning the ins and outs of your business, your process, your software, and documenting and recommending ways forward or improvement. So on to what is Grant Plus. So Grant Plus is a cloud-based software application, and as mentioned before, we're leveraging the Microsoft Dynamics 365 and Power Apps platform. So basically what the focus is of grants is a smart, logical automation of grants management. It provides a full range of functionality for grants. That's end-to-end workflow. So anything from the beginning, which is the application process, the reviews of those applications, the approvals of those applications onto the agreements, and the administration of the funds and the performance tracking of those funds. We focus on in a robust set of features that Divya will take us through a bit later today. And it's specifically designed with the Canadian government in mind. So we've worked with a number of different departments, both federal, provincial, and municipal. But basically, its core focus and core design is to meet the needs of Canadian government and ensure that we're delivering grants and automation the proper way in alignment with the Treasury Board model. So types of funding programs supported by Grant Plus. So it's not just a kind of the solution is very flexible. It's not just a finicky kind of one path type of solution. It can be extended to meet the needs of any of the verticals as well as others. But the 5 major types of granting programs we've seen are grants, contributions, subsidies, scholarships, and loans. When it comes down to it fundamentally within the feature set and the technology, there's a lot of overlapping principles between these 5. So where we see commonality within that within the technical area, we can configure and implement based off of any of these programs and the flexibility or the unique requirements of each one. And the tool supports kind of each vertical and the ability to change and adjust for any of these programs, not just singularly. So you can do any of these 5, multiple of one, etc. So it's very flexible in that way. So some of the key business features of Grant Plus is program management. So program or funding opportunities are defined and set up, and there's ways of, there's 2 kind of major models that we see with the program management. One is fixed period intake. So you have a set period where you're going to be granting those funds. As well as the continuous intake. So year over year, you have the same grant available. Maybe the fund bucket is changing, but you want to have it available kind of year over year and not have kind of any downtime. There's also multiple program elements that are set up. So, the various needs of each program. So how many intake forms? Sometimes there's, a request of information before the formal application. So any of these things are configurable and can meet the needs of the program. So the application intake, same thing, very, very flexible. However many forms or submissions that are necessary, our team would go through with your department or group, identify kind of what the recommendation is for the application intake process, how many forms there should be, and how to simplify that and automate the process. Then moving on to kind of the assessment of those applications. There's various ways that we can do that with the tools here. Some of the examples that we've had are, external reviewers need to kind of process and review the information because they're subject matter experts and they hold the knowledge as to how kind of how quality the application information is. And there's also kind of the options all the way down to kind of an automated assessment where the system's going through a checklist of, is the information valid? Did they meet the necessary minimum requirements, and pushing it on to the administration phase of the project. And then, of course, the administration and monitoring. So once the funding decision is approved, payment schedules and requisition processing steps are enabled. Again, very, very flexible to the needs and wants of the program. But basically, it's showing kind of the various steps and the key business features of the solution. So a little bit more on that. Divya is going to now take us through kind of the intake portal.
Thank you, Michael. So from a Grant Plus aspect, functionality perspective, there are two key areas. One is the intake portal, where we get the application intake, where the funding program details are provided to applicants and to other participants, for example, reviewers, partners, and other organizations, whatever key role the funding program needs. And then the second aspect to it is the program office. So there are decisions to be made, there's processing of the application that has to happen, and it follows the complete life cycle of a program from like the design and marketing aspect of the outreach, where you're getting the information, you're getting in leads and opportunities, setting up the funding programs, getting the applications in, and assessing and recommending next steps, making the decisions and approving funding agreements, right to, as Michael had said, monitoring and reporting that aspect. But going further beyond that, setting up payment schedules, processing the amendments, and getting in repayment for a number of grant applications or loans, for example. There's a repayment aspect which can be set up as part of the system. And then, of course, the audit of the entire program or the system, and the closing of the project. So for example, at the end of the annual period, you close the program down and then set it up for the next year, or you can also have it where it's continuous, like there is no closing to the program, things like that. So there's a lot of different aspects in terms of the configurability and the flexibility of the program office as well. Some of the key system features, and I will walk you through some examples as we walk through the case study for NRC, and I'll show you what the portal and the program office looks like. But at a high level, this is basically what the key system features look like. So from a web portal features perspective, we have different aspects where you can set up secure access to the portal. It can be through things like Microsoft Entra ID. It can be through GC Key for government portals. It can be through external sources like Google and Apple identification aspects. There's multi-factor authentication, that added authentication method in terms of making sure that the right person is seeing the data that is provided to them. There's different aspects in terms of setting up user profiles, organization profiles. We can also set it up to be multilingual, so English, French, of course, but there are also other languages that can be configured. It is WCAG compliant in terms of 2.1 AA, and provides the AODA compliance as well in terms of the visual aspect to the portal. And it operates at a protected B security level as part of the Canadian government ITSG 33 security standards. There's other aspect to it where notification center can be set up, where program office can send personal notifications to the applicant, for example, similar to how CRA sends us messages, personal messages that allow us to log into the portal and look at our personal messages. There's also service requests where the applicant can send in requests from their perspective and communicate to the program office individually. And then there's also the aspect related to document uploads and downloads. A lot of program configuration requires showing proof of either financial statements or other aspects, and a lot of that includes having documents uploaded and downloaded. And then because we're living in the 21st century, we are using mobile phones and things like that. So it is highly compatible with using on mobile applications and tablets, not just on laptops and screens. The other aspect to it is it can be configured to allow for different roles. Applicants, for sure, applicants can come in, go through an eligibility assessment, which then opens up the right application form for them. They can provide a digital attestation on the portal itself, which kind of avoids the need of having documents uploaded from a digital attestation perspective, but also it kind of creates a confirmation and a timestamp in the system of when they've confirmed the terms and conditions. It also allows for amendments. So not a lot of times, even though business rules are attached to applications, there are reasons for asking for amendments on an application, so that is possible. And you can have collaborative applications, and I'll walk you through one of that example as well. And reviewers. So if you have NRC, for example, has reviewers who come in and do a peer review and selection committee review on the applications provided. So there's an aspect to it where you can set up a role that reviewers have access to, provide privacy rules in terms of what the reviewers see as part of the original application process, and also provide information related to the conflict of interest if they are reviewing a certain application and things like that. So there's a lot of flexibility in setting up what those portal elements look like. As part of the program office or the administrative aspect of things, that's where the back office, program office features come in. So there's the opportunity to set up leads and leads and opportunities where you can set up leads which probably you don't win or you set aside and things like that. You have the open opportunity to set up funding programs, and as I mentioned, you can set it up annually, you can set it up continuous, you can close them as and when you need them. Then there's also the different aspects in terms of what you're managing for the grants and contribution files, whether it be loans, whether subsidies, whether scholarships, any of that. There's a number of different configurations that help manage each and every aspect of that within the system. You can also schedule appointments and notify stakeholders. For example, there's a bunch of options to send emails, create internal tasks for the team, set up appointments within the system that can be managed as part of the daily reporting and dashboard aspect of things. Then we can have agreements and approval set up where we can also integrate with third-party tools like DocuSign or Adobe Sign to get that approval in place. Then there's the monitoring and performance aspect to things where you can monitor the stats, performance, the progress, see what needs to change over time, things like that. And we had already talked about amendments and agreements related to the applications where things need to change because not all the information provided is accurate. We can also set up payments and in terms of setting up an integration with SAP systems or financial systems that can provide the data directly to the system or back and forth between the different systems. And then tracking the audit and closeout activities. If there's reporting that needs to happen, if you need to follow up and get reports on the funding that you provided, for example, that's something that can be set up in the system as well. And there's also the aspect of teams, users, and security management. So if your organization, for example, has different departments and different business levels, the system has the capability to set that up for the different business levels and provide permissions to entities based on that business level. And document management, as we had mentioned before, in terms of like getting uploads and downloads happening for documents, but also like integrating with systems or setting it up where SharePoint has the documents stored versus in the system itself, or any other third-party tool as well, if that's something that your organization is using. So in terms of today's webinar, our focus is on providing you a quick overview of what we implemented for NRC and especially for the National Killam Program. I'm going to ask Natalie to just provide us a background of that before we continue.
Thanks very much, Divya. And joining me today is also Heather Salavera, who's the program manager for the National Killam Program. And we're quite happy to be here to be your case study. It was fascinating to hear about all of the functionality available through the Grants Plus application. I think we probably use about 60% or somewhere within that range of available functionality. And that's really something that we're very well set up to do. I thought I wanted to just provide a little bit of context for you around the National Killam Program so that it'll give you a sense of the scope and scale of the kind of program that we're running at the National Research Council, and why this solution is very well fit for our needs. So the National Killam Program is a research recognition program that's really built on this vision of building Canada's future through advanced study. It provides fellowships and prizes to individuals in the case of prizes and institutions in the case of fellowships. And so really that funding is essentially earmarked for funding research excellence initiatives in Canada. It was established actually in 1965 and through the will of Dorothy Killam. So it's a private trust that was established in 1965. And this trust provides programming in 6 different institutions across Canada, mostly in universities. But in the case of the national program, it is now housed at the National Research Council. However, that wasn't always the case. We inherited the program through a conversation and eventually through a memorandum of understanding between the National Research Council and Canada Council. And so it came to the NRC just in 2021. We signed an MOU in 2021. It was actually August of 2021. And we had this pressure to redesign the program, implement that redesign, and sort of launch by April of 2022. So it was a very sort of aggressive timeline to onboard this new program to the NRC, do a lot of thoughtful work in terms of what the design would look like, and then try to be open for intake in April of 2022. So that's 8 months. I don't know if you've all done the math already, but that's how long we had to do that work. And so really, you know, I had a few considerations at that moment in time. I had the funding for a grants management system right away. I could have opted not to go that route. You know, while I had the funding, I didn't necessarily have in-house at the NRC the IT folks there to support the implementation. At that time, we were looking at a bit of an intake backlog for new projects at the NRC. So I knew that, you know, I was looking at a scenario where I needed to look outside. And due to past positive experiences with software as a service, I really found myself wanting to see, is there anything in the landscape that is really a software as a service type of model? So I started to look around and really wanted to see if I could get myself in a situation, because again, I don't have technology folks within my own team to be supported long-term, you know, in whatever solution I chose. And, you know, a couple of other things that I had in mind at the time is that aggressive time frame meant that if there were products out there and available to me in the market that were pre-configured, that could kind of help accelerate that development cycle, then those were of high interest to me. I was very fortunate because on my end of, within my project team, I had a business analyst who was very much capable of understanding systems and how systems function and writing some high quality business requirements at that time. So I felt like I was in a good position to actually go to the market and look for a solution that, you know, kind of met all of that criteria, and maybe even boldly tried to go so far as to actually open a minimum viable product for intake in April of 2022. So that was sort of the backstory and a little bit of what we kind of went through from a decision-making perspective. And so I had worked previously in some implementations where we did develop this minimum viable product, and basically, essentially what that was is just enough to do what you need to do to get you started. And then you can work through various iterations to improve the product and to kind of work all of the changes into the product as you go. And so we went through the procurement process, and Eperformance won the contract. And we worked quickly. We finalized the design for our intake functionality because we did decide to work in phases, and that first phase, as to be able to explain later, was looking at how to configure intake for the National Killam Program. And so we finalized that design in January, and we opened that product for intake in April of 2022. So it was very quickly done. You know, we had business development expertise both on the e-performance side, but also within the program office. So While we were doing intake, we also did the design and implementation of our review module. And so that came shortly thereafter. I think it was June of 2022, just in time, delivery. So, so we were continuously adding to our product. We started with one module, we added the second module, and had them both released in the first year. What we did in the background, though, is because we know that we're not perfect, and solutions aren't going to be perfect. It is a minimum viable product. We really prepared ourselves to run parallel processes, so processes that would run completely in an automated way through our GMS solution, but also equally, we were ready to do anything manually whenever there was a point of friction to be sort of handled. So I hopefully didn't steal too much of your review of the cycles that we went through, Divya, but I just wanted to provide that sort of context that it was really very thoughtfully done to have a phased design, build, launch, design, build, launch. Over to you.
Thank you, Natalie, for that background and for the context. It kind of ties into the next few slides that we are going to be talking about. So as Natalie mentioned, when we first started the collaboration with the NRC, from our perspective, the biggest challenge was getting the two programs out between the February to April timeframe to make sure that it's working. Applicants can log in, can apply for the funding, two funding programs that had been set up, the Killam Prize and the Dorothy Killam Fellowship, and setting up the SaaS solution as well, because it was being like having a Grant Plus system in the background, but also adding the NRC specific elements to it and being ready on time and making sure that as we develop, we also think about the future aspects of that system. So it's not just going to be the intake portal, but it's also going to be processing. It's going to be the review process that comes in and any potential other enhancement features that could get into the system from a future iterative perspective. So the design and implementation approach that we used is setting up the NRC tenant to begin with, to set up the different environments, development, test, and production to be more specific. And as Natalie mentioned, because of the mindset of having a minimum viable product launch to production, that helped a lot even from our perspective, because we had a specific goal in mind to get and to perfect that into production for launch, and then think about the design and implementation after that initial launch in an iterative and incremental delivery model. So start with the basic minimum, get the applications in productions in the April 2024 timeframe, and then build on that as we get feedback, as we follow the agile methodology, which is something that we follow for almost all our clients, and also then support, enable the support and maintenance services after the initial launch. So once it's launched, it doesn't mean we stop our implementation processes. We also provide support and support services, and through an SLA contract that allows for the maintenance and the the support model to be implemented almost immediately or enabled almost immediately as soon as it's in production. So Natalie kind of walked you through some of the aspects of the timeline as well. So since the beginning, since 2021, we've had actually 4 iterative cycles. The first one being the MVP iteration starting in December 2021. Within 6 weeks, we configured the entire system. We went into UAT, where UAT being the user acceptance testing that NRC did from a business perspective to make sure that the system has all the elements that they required before it went into production. And then in production, we deployed it into production through a rapid deployment process. It went live in April 2022. And as it went live, we also started talking about the next aspect, as Natalie mentioned. The intake portal is up and running. The applicants can put in their applications. But what about the processing of those applications and the reviewer portal? So while the application intake was happening, at the same time, we were configuring and understanding the different requirements related to application processing and setting up the reviewer portal. So between April to July, we had the second aspect of the configuration or second iterative model up and running in production, where the review process for the production applications happened between July to September 2022. And then between September and December 2022, NRC had a number of different feedback elements and loops enabled, which gave us a lot of first-hand feedback from university end users and other applicants and reviewers who provided a lot of good feedback, which enabled the iteration 3, which was an enhancement cycle in terms of making sure that the UX and the UI capabilities of the system are enhanced to make sure that there are no usability issues. There's all the nitty-gritty things that we don't usually think about when we are doing or implementing a system, but the end user has to work through. Those are the things that we focused on in iteration 3. And then between September to February, we had a number of different requirements implemented from an enhancement perspective. And the second annual intake process happened in April 2023, which included a lot of that feedback that we got and improved the system in terms of the second annual cycle. Now, after the second annual cycle, we did, NRC did consider a number of other improvements from a program office perspective. So the iteration 3 focused on the portal, making sure that the end user had different elements based on their feedback. But iteration 4 also thought about how can we improve the program office's daily activities. So there were a number of elements considered for that. But one of the main things that we also launched for the iteration 4 is the new Killam NRC Paul Corkum program. So we configured and implemented a third program between Jan and March of 2024. And in April 2024 this year, the new program cycle and the new intake aspect was initiated. And the Paul Corkum program also went live in production. I think back to you, Natalie, in terms of statistics you've collected over the past few years, 2 years, I should say.
Thanks, Divya. Yes, so that program, the new Killam NRC Paul Corkum Fellowship, is still open for intake right now. It closes on June 20th. So, yes, that's a really good summary of how we spent the last 2 years working through several iterations to get to what is essentially pretty much a feature complete at this point, pending new requirements system. So I think that kind of shows you what is possible by kind of working in an iterative manner. There are a couple of places, obviously we measure the performance of our program on many different levels, but in terms of the measuring our immediate outcomes, there are a couple of administrative measures that we have in place that are very specific to the way that our efficiency as an office through the use of the portal. So we measure that in 2 ways. One is the online portal efficiency in the application process, so in that intake process. And the way that we define that is by the percentage of nominations or applications to our programs that can be done without any intervention. So no human being needs to intervene in that sort of work. And then the second measure that we have is that same measure, but for the peer review process. And so I just want to take a couple of minutes to kind of walk you through where we started and where we are now. We had a principle in the first year of operations where we wanted to make sure that we had human support at any moment when friction was encountered. And what we found really interesting and what we learned from many of our program stakeholders is one of the friction points wasn't really a system friction point, but a business rule one, where we had people who provided letters of support for a submission who were kind of having to log into the system and upload a letter, whereas the preference really was to sort of manage those relationships to allow the universities to manage those relationships. So in our first year, we did a lot of uploading of letters of support on behalf. We actively offered and did it all the time on behalf of letter writers. And so you can see in our first year in the intake, we were 64% of the time things went through without us having to intervene. And we've adjusted our functionality. We still actively offer that service if they're not comfortable sending it to their university administrator. So you'll see our number will never get to 100%, but it's jumped up to 83% now, just through some changes in functionality. But again, we're always going to be in a position where when things are difficult, we support our clients. And then for peer review was very interesting based on our experience with intake. You know, we really wanted to give peer reviewers the option. You can either use our portal or we can, you know, we can handle this manually. So in our first year, you'll see 26.5% of the people, let's call them early adopters and keen folks, took us up on the option of using the portal. You know, the vast majority did not. However, we removed that option in the second year after going through receiving the feedback from reviewers, making data enhancements, and you'll see that number jumped right up to 91% when the option was removed, and very, very successful use of the portal. I have to say, if there's ever an issue or a real friction point, it's usually just having to log in. It's people trying to figure out multi-factor authentication seems to be the issue. So that kind of gives you a sense of you know, what we're seeing in terms of our overall efficiency and how things have changed from 1 to year 2. And I think I have one more slide.
Yes, lessons learned.
Just a couple of wrap-up points on lessons learned. I think I've already mentioned, you know, the quality of our MVP requirements, having that sort of pair of a business analyst on my side and on the contractor side as well, that we could put together and make sure that the requirements were very well understood by the development team. I think that was highly effective. Just making the decision to Divya's earlier point that that's the launch date and we're going to have an MVP, I think was very, very useful. And it also, I think, set the tone and the expectations both within my team but within the user community that we're going to start with something straightforward that we're going to be continuously improving afterwards. I think the support model was also essential, being able to have human beings kind of remove friction from the process. That was certainly useful. And really not just the support of my team, but knowing that through the procurement model that we would have some technical support hours available to us, that bugs would be fixed. You know, immediately, that if we had problems, you know, we had people that we could go to and they would kind of figure it out for us. So I think that was equally useful. And then the community involvement. I think, you know, we're often very cautious about putting something imperfect out into the universe, and you know, but you know, one of the true agreed, you know, that could take a bit of a hit from a client service perspective, but the benefit of doing that is like you put it out and then they can provide input on the requirements. They can, you know, you've got people who are early adopters, you've got people who ask excellent questions, and just through the nature of their questions, you're able to refine your systems tremendously. And so I guess, you know, that's a sort of a key lesson learned, and something that if I were ever in the position again, I'd make sure that we have community involvement in the loop.
Thank you, Natalie. That helps a lot in terms of just understanding what a client goes through when you're launching something new. So I'm going to just, before we go into the next phase, I'm just going to quickly show you what we've implemented for NRC, just to give you a quick look at what Grant Plus solution looks like. So this is what the applicant portal looks like in terms of what they come and see after they log in. So we have the homepage, but we have options in terms of the menu where we have a help page where NRC has put in a lot of good information related to how they can do the different, how they can fill in the different forms, but also FAQ, contact us information, things like that. Highly configurable. It can be modified to fit any client's needs. And the program portal. So when it comes to finding the right funding opportunity, as you can see, this is our test environment, but it is possible to enable or disable funding programs depending on where you're at in your funding budget cycle. But it also provides a lot of good information for each program package. So there's a lot of information in different formats that you can provide to the user before they have to make a decision of what kind of funding application that they can use. And then there's the option to click apply, for example, and go in and submit an application. So as you can see, I can open and I'm just going to do a quick submit here in terms of what can be set up. So these are the mandatory fields that NRC is requesting the applicant enter. However, there are options in terms of adding in any other information related to what your organization needs as part of that funding program application. So for example, applying for the fellowship requires the institution contact to be identified as a primary contact on the application. And this is important because the application contact, institution contact actually provides attestation to the application. So there's multiple collaborators on the same application. There's the applicant, there's the institution contact, and there's an optional referral contact that provides letters of support when it comes to the research fellowship application. As you can see, there's different elements, different pages that in terms of the application intake itself, and it also has a bunch of business rules in terms of what kind of information is provided to the user. For example, in this case, if they don't select yes, they cannot even validate and save or continue to the next step. So they have to accept the terms and conditions. The other aspect to it is also they have to provide a minimum number of documents, for example, and it is user friendly in terms of providing that information to the applicant, saying you absolutely have to attach one each of research proposal, candidate statement, example, things like that. This is the applicant view. As I was talking about application collaboration, I wanted to also show you what it looks like if an institution contact was looking at it. Mel, for example, is the institution contact for an application. As you can see, there are differences in terms of the application pages that are usable or viewable to the different applicants, the different roles. And it is something that can be easily configured in terms of what is read-only, what is locked, what is provided to the user role to be entered in. And it also has a bunch of validation rules and visuals. For example, it shows that the application is 100% complete. It shows that the page has been successfully saved with a green check. So different elements in terms of visual usability, and some of the enhancements that we added on to the second and third iterative cycles as well in terms of what this looks like. Similar to that is also the reviewer portal. The reviewer portal, for example, has additional fields in the menu where it provides the option for reviewer profile and my reviews, and it has different elements in terms of what the reviewer can see. So the reviewer, for example, cannot see the actual documents of the original application until they accept that they are reviewing the application and do not have a conflict of interest. So it saves in the data privacy of the applicant unless and until the reviewer is saying that they are acceptable in terms of proceeding to the next stages. So there are a lot of conditional options that can be set up as well on the portal, depending on who the user is and what kind of pages need to be displayed. The other aspect that we had talked about is the program office. So the program office has different elements in terms of what they see, what is viewable to them, and something that is called as the model-driven app is used in terms of setting it up, having the different entities and how they interact with each other. So we can set up dashboards, which are something that is available. We can also use Power BI dashboards, which is another aspect to the data reporting elements. And we can have the program office validate and view all of the information that has been provided by the applicant on the portal. For example, they can see the supporting documents that have been provided. They can review and make sure that the reviewer, they can run a review, what do you call it, matching tool, which kind of enables the matching of the applicant to the appropriate reviewer. In that sense, it enables a visual of who is the most applicable reviewer for this applicant, and it provides a scoring system as well. So a lot of different automated tools that can be provided in terms of the program office itself. So that's the main set of features in terms of what the system provides. And if you would like to have a demo separately, please do not hesitate to contact us, and we can set up a dedicated demo for that as well. Just looking at the time, I'm just going to walk you through quickly a few more slides. So when it comes to software as a service, we have two main packages. One is the program level package, which is something that you would utilize if you wanted to start off with a single grant or a contribution program, for example. It includes the portal and the Power Apps elements of the program office that I showed you. We have the option in terms of what the services include would be setting up the environment, whether it's staging environment, production, the entire tenant, setting up the configuration support in terms of how we configure the different aspects to meet your needs, and then also enable a help desk support agreement, as we had talked about before, in terms of having a support enabled in place after the system goes live in production. The other aspect to it is enterprise level. So maybe you have like a bunch of departments and a different set of program elements that need to be configured and have to go live with all of those program elements, not just one. We also have the enterprise level packaging that is that can be put into scope. It has a few more elements in terms of what the package includes. It has enterprise planning and program readiness assessment. So we do a lot of planning internally from our perspective, and also collaborating with the client in terms of what that production go live is going to look like and what the different elements are going to be. We have dedicated business analyst time and user story development in terms of our agile methodology set up. We have the a model GNC program up and running to make sure that the support is provided for that in terms of making sure that the transition to the client support model, for example, is set up properly. And we also have training related to the technical transition in terms of if the client would like to configure elements themselves. There's a different set of transition elements that go with that. And then again, there's help desk support agreements that can be put into place. And if you're not looking for a SaaS package, for example, if you have client hosted or managed solutions that you would like Eperformance to support on, do not hesitate to contact us. We do have experience in that aspect as well, where we have managed solutions for client hosted environments and client hosted solutions. And in terms of a quick starter kit, in terms of when we are doing an implementation cycle, or we are starting, for example, with the NRC's MVP iteration cycle, we go through, as I mentioned, agile methodology. It's kind of a hybrid model because it depends on each client and it varies depending on what the client needs are. But we start from a planning phase where we define all the scope, we identify resources, we set up the statement of work, things like that. We go into the design phase where we set up the architecture of the solution, make sure that the tenant and environments are set up, the licenses are requisitioned requisitioned as needed, and a backlog of requirements is at a high level is ready. And then as we get into implementations, we follow the sprint ceremonies and develop, test, and recycle again and again till it goes into official user acceptance testing, where all the critical and major issues that cannot be going into production are fixed, made sure that all the elements that are not fixed are put into a backlog of improvements. And then we follow the launch playbook, where we have a go live playbook set up, make sure all the elements are in place, production go live is key is triggered, and then the customer service level agreement falls into place. And we also have a round of lessons learned and feedback collection, as we had talked about before. And then we follow this model in terms of an iterative and incremental optimization element. Just a quick note on upcoming Grant Plus features, and we will be sharing the slide deck out after the webinar. So we are working all the time in terms of improving the baseline elements of our Grant Plus solution. So a number of different features are in our roadmap from now till late 2025. We keep enhancing this depending on what the client feedback comes in, but also what Microsoft provides in terms of what they are building, what they are improving, and what they are providing to us as well. And one of the main things that we are looking at is AI features. So we are now exploring and researching and doing a number of different R&D elements in relation to the Copilot feature that, for example, Microsoft provides, making sure that we have something called as a chatbot for the portal and the back office, something that we are exploring a lot more into in terms of what kind of scenarios the chatbot could provide, some natural language processing related to what the elements of that chatbot will be in terms of questions and the answers that the chatbot will provide. I want to leave a few minutes to answer questions, but here's our contact information. So if you have any follow-up questions, or if you would like to request a demo, or if you have anything else you would like to contact us about, please feel free to use these contact elements. And I think we can just go into the questions. And I see Ryan had one question, and Todd, I'm assuming you would like to answer that.
Yes, I would. Thank you, Brian, for being very patient. You asked this right initially, and here we are now at the end. What we think you mean by this is basically you've had a submission come in from an external portal. They've provided information to you. There's been a process in the back end that you've gone through, and you need to release another follow-up document or form for your clients to fill out. Do I have that kind of correct?
Yeah, more or less. So yeah, the way our grant process works is they apply, it gets reviewed, and then once payment has been made, we call that our decision date. They have 6 months from that decision date to follow up and let us know, usually a testimonial, some other information that we might need for our partners. Yeah, things like that.
So we absolutely can do that. You didn't see that in today's demo because Killam doesn't use exactly that same functionality, but we do have other clients that use very similar functionality. So, you know, in my other life of implementing, my current client calls it the final review. And since we're a very data mobile system, what we do is, you know, during the award phase where all of their numbers and values get approved and everything like that, we can then take that information, duplicate it, and release it out to them in read-only fashion to say, okay, you said you were going to do this. Did you do that? And if not, you know, what was your variance sort of thing? So we can collect, you know, actuals against the proposed values and things like that, as well as, you know, putting in text areas, question boxes, that sort of thing to collect testimonials and everything like that. Specifically around the 6-month release date, if you have that decision date and you need that form released 6 months exactly from that date, we could run what is called a Power Automate flow in the back end, and we literally tell it, run this in 6 months. And it'll wake up. Usually we have it wake up about 2 in the morning just to check the system to say, is there anything I need to send out today? And if there is, then we will send out and release that form for them to actually follow up. We've also had similar sort of things. You mentioned testimonials where we actually can kind of stage a testimonial to actually be released into your public website if you have that kind of level of integration in. So literally you can just kind of read through the testimonial, approve it, and then we can automatically publish it onto a public website if you want to go that sort of deep. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Now we've cleared out all the questions that were available to us. Does anybody else have anything? This is by no means a last minute thing. Yes, Janet.
So I work for a we deliver a several contributions program, but for our core program, we have a 2-phased application process. So essentially we get a expression of interest, screen for eligibility, and then if they're eligible, we invite them to complete a more detailed application. Just wondering if that's supported as well.
100%, it would use the same sort of thing. We have very experience with that. So, you know, our EOI, expression of interest, and then the detailed proposal, whatever that is. And then the nice thing there is that whatever they've put into the EOI, we can bring forward that information into the detailed proposal. So they don't necessarily have to reiterate, they can expand on it. The whole solution really is about making it convenient not only for your program officers and helping you execute your programs, but also for your end users. So, you know, I think we've all had to probably interact with a website that where at one point in time you had to say, I just told you that. So once we actually have an answer to a question, we don't like to re-ask that information unless it's of benefit to the business. That's a little more on our security side as opposed to our grant side. So we like to just kind of reiterate the information and remember when we have already received answers for various things, and, you know, also show it back to the client for those particular instances. Does that cover that?
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes,
no worries.
you.
Just being polite, too Canadian.
If there are any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Just put the slide back in terms of what our email address and website links are. But in conclusion, I'd like to also provide in the benefits, a quick summary of the benefits. And we, as I mentioned before, we will be sending the slide deck and recording out after the close of the webinar. And there are links in terms of how you can reach us and where you can see the offerings that we have on our marketplace, both for Grant Plus and Security Plus. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and especially Natalie and Heather for joining us today on our webinar. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.